welcome all of you to First Parish Church. I know time is a very precious thing, and you have given up your time tonight to be here, and I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank our co-sponsors, in addition to the Action for Social Justice Committee here at First Parish Church. This evening is also sponsored by the League of Women Voters here in Westford, as well as Indivisible Westford. So I'd like to thank them. And all of our panelists, who you will be introduced to shortly, and our moderator, Ellen Hardy. For me, here in Westford, I learned about our town government, I learned about town meeting, I learned about civilized discussions with people in my town who might believe differently than I do, and pretty much what democracy was all about at a local community level from Ellen. She was our town moderator here in Westford for 25 years, so when we wanted to have a moderator for tonight's event, she was of course our first choice, and she graciously accepted. So Ellen will be taking us through the agenda and introducing the panelists, but thank you very much.
Well, the Action for Social Justice Committee has set themselves and you a very high bar tonight in terms of what they want to accomplish. This is what we would like to achieve this evening. By the time we all meet tonight at 9 o'clock, we would like to provide you with an understanding of the forces that drive immigration. We hope that you understand the current issues and the challenges faced by immigrants today. That you understand what is being done to respond to the crisis, and that each of you understands how you can take action from tonight on. And we couldn't have a better group to help us do that. You actually have the descriptions of who these 5 women are in your brochure, and I'd much rather hear them than hear me. So I'm actually just going to go down the table and let each of them tell you who they are, how they got where they are, and what they're doing in their field, and why they're the probably 5 best people we could have gotten here tonight to help us with this discussion. So on my immediate left is Amy Anthony, and we'll go right down. Amy, please.
My name is Amy Anthony. I'm a staff attorney at the Northeast Justice Center. We are a legal services organization, and we serve all of the Merrimack Valley and the North Shore. So we have offices in Lowell, Lawrence, Haverhill, and Lynn. And we provide free legal services to predominantly low-income people. So we do consumer, housing, family, and immigration law for the most part.
And Bofa Malone on her left. Bofa?
Hi everyone, my name is Bofa Malone. I was a former president of the Cambodian Mutual Assistance Association. I'm a trustee of Middlesex Community College. I came here when I was 9 as a refugee. My parents, our family fled here after the Khmer Rouge regime. They lived through that, and even though I was born right after the war, they knew that the country wouldn't be safe. So my first memory was coming on foot with my mom from Cambodia to Thailand. And we came here in 1989, and I am on a leave of absence from Enterprise Bank right now, and I'm on a number of boards. So, including Girls Inc. and Lowell General Hospital as well.
And on her left is Cheryl Hamilton from the National Institute. Cheryl, please.
Hi friends, it's really wonderful to be back in this church. We have such wonderful supporters. As she said, I work for the International Institute of New England. We are one of the largest refugee resettlement and immigrant serving organizations. We're actually celebrating our 100th anniversary this year, which is pretty remarkable. Mission really hasn't changed in 100 years. 100 years ago, we helped immigrant women find jobs and housing and healthcare and education, and 100 years later, we do the same thing, but we've included men. And in my role, I try to bridge relationships across communities and partners and faith communities. So we've had a lot of relationships here with this particular church who hosts welcome dinners for some of our refugee families.
And Liza Ryan, please let us know who you are.
Hi. My name is Liza Ryan. I'm the Director of Organizing at the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition, commonly referred to as MIRA, because that's a really long name. And we're the oldest and largest coalition of immigrant serving and immigrant-led organizations in Massachusetts, and we have a sister organization in New Hampshire. We just turned 31, but feeling spry. And we advocate on federal and state and municipal policy, as well as we do some citizenship clinics and register people to vote and do civic engagement. So if you want to knock doors with us this midterm, this is a shameless plea. I came to MIRA via a diplomatic think tank in Honolulu, Hawaii, and no, it was not my choice to move to Massachusetts. And I was brought here. And before that, I worked in refugee camps for about 7 years in sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East.
And say the best to last, perhaps? Rosa Paez.
So Rosa Paez, I'm from the city of Lowell, St. Patrick, and I'm a treasurer of the Merrimack Valley Project. Merrimack Valley is an organization that empowers communities to support social justice. And at this particular time, we're working with immigration. That's a very important area that we support in our organization. And that's why I'm here today, because these great ladies here, they service, but I'm experiencing it. I'm leaving it because I'm also, as a spouse of a person that came to the United States as an illegal immigrant, I experienced this. My family, on my husband's side, some of them are still illegal. And obviously there is a problem with the immigration system that we all need to work with and make it better.
Thank you so much. I have a list of questions that were created by the Action for Social Justice Committee. When the organizers of this panel got together, we were trying to be very systematic, and so I explained to these women that we were going to do this, that I would address one question to each of them, and they said, let's do it a different way. I said, it's your night. Therefore, what I'm going to do is sort of toss the questions out and see who catches them. And when they have had the opportunity to deal with the first 5 of these questions, I want you to be thinking about the questions that you might be asking that you have on your minds as well. So we'll start with the panelists, and then it will be your turn, and we will come back to the panelists for the final word. So the first question that was come up with by the committee at the church is, what are the conditions driving migration? And why do so many immigrants come to the United States? Can you just give a brief description of the conditions and situations that can help people leave their homeland for a new country? Okay.
So a designated hitter. So there are a lot of reasons, obviously. So in Massachusetts, we have about 1.1 million foreign-born people and their families. So that's about 16.2% of our population. And they come here for different reasons. They come here to go to MIT. They come here to become the best doctors in the world. They come here to clean our office buildings. And they also come here to flee persecution and some really terrible things like rape conversion therapy in Uganda. So it's difficult just to say that there's one reason, but I will venture, and I'm going to throw this out here, and I fully embrace my panelists pushing back on this one. Oftentimes we talk about the immigration system, that it's broken. And I will venture and say that it is not broken. It is working exactly the way that we have designed it to work, which is to get the most amount of labor and provide people with the least amount of rights. The only reason why we get strawberries for $2.99 in February is because we have undocumented labor. And so why do people come? Because we need them here. Because our system doesn't work without them. And that's undocumented people, which we have. Did you know that in Massachusetts we have 10,000 undocumented Irish people here? Why do the Irish come? Well, because there's a cultural linkage. It's kind of a rite of passage in Ireland to come and work in Massachusetts for a little bit, but because there's a lack of opportunities, a lack of mobility, especially after some of the economic crashes in Europe and the inflation in Ireland. And so it's very difficult to generalize, but I will say that we put a lot of different labels on who is here and unauthorized, illegal, and I am going to throw it back to 2 of my panelists who have different experience. I will say I'm also an immigrant to this country. My parents were Americans who fled America and moved to Canada. because of their political beliefs. And I was born in Canada and then grew up on the border and watched it militarize after 9/11, about a quarter mile from the border. And so, why am I here? My husband asked me that question on election night. Do you want to go back? And I said, no, maybe, no. So I am here because I recognize this as a moment where we have our entire fabric of our nation is on the line. And the same reason why my parents left, we believe in the higher ideal of America. And I would say in addition to the economic opportunities and the safety that America has given to some people at some time, that is one of the reasons why people come here. But
And I know for me, as I mentioned earlier, that my family, my mom and dad basically lived through the Khmer Rouge regime. They witnessed their own families, their own people being killed and murdered. And even though the war was over already, they knew that the country wouldn't be safe. And because of that, we had a cousin who immigrated here before us, and my uncle. And you know, we hear these stories that America is this great place. It's a place of opportunity. It's a place of freedom. And you know, as a child, I just remember living in the Thai refugee camp, and every night, you know, instead of hearing lullabies, I would go to bed hearing gunfires and bombings and hiding under our house and praying that one day we would come to this place, America, that I never knew, but just heard of this great place that, you know, I would have freedom, I would be able to eat, I wouldn't be hungry, and I wouldn't be hearing these sounds anymore. So we came here because we wanted a safe place, and that's what America did for us. When we first came, everyone were so open, people were so caring, and if it wasn't for, you know, many caring teachers, mentors, and organizations that took us in, I wouldn't be where I am today. So we came here because we needed a safe place.
Yeah, definitely. I have to agree with both. My husband also came to the United States as an illegal immigrant, and he also came from El Salvador, Central America, where they were also having a civil war. And they were, as a young man, he could have been drafted into the military, which presently is, believe it or not, the president of El Salvador now was a member of that militia that killed a lot of people and drafted these young men into that militia and created a lot of hostile environment in their country and instability. And seeing that in his youth and feeling unsafe, when he had the opportunity, he came to the United States looking for safety. Same thing.
Thank you all very much. We hear both the term immigrant and refugee. Could you just clarify for us, is there a difference on those terms interchangeable so we understand the terms?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm actually uncomfortable with the fact that we often say immigrants and refugees. I mean, refugees are essentially a protected class of immigrants. I often say foreign-born, and I am also uncomfortable with it. I mean, technically under international law, a refugee is someone who's fleeing persecution. But, as we know, there are many immigrants who are non-refugees also fleeing persecution. And so, really, for me, it's the immigrant experiences, it's the journeys that they go through, and the new challenges they face when they come in this country. All immigrants have to find a new job, have to rebuild their life through education, have to navigate the healthcare system. The documents are the items that get them in this country, but the experiences and the way we should support newcomers should be equal, in my opinion. Now, the reason there's often the description of immigrants versus refugees is the services provided to newcomers are not equal, depending on who you are. So our agency serves, for example, well, until this year, we used to serve 650 refugees coming into this country every year under a federal refugee resettlement program. As we know, Trump reduced that number to 45,000 last year from 110,000. I'm sorry to say that we don't even know if we're going to get to the 45,000 this year. We're not even at the appropriate level of the quarter as a country right now. There's been less than 6,000 refugees brought in. One of the reasons for that is because even if you lower the quota, you don't necessarily have to process the cases. You can leave State Department roles empty in Africa so that people can't actually get interviewed. You can have people in the Middle East who are going to have their medical cases expire because there's a deadline on them and have to wait to re-up. So there's different ways to affect, but I can go on and on about that. But nonetheless, when a refugee comes here, there's an agency like ours, and we are allocated resources to make sure that refugees have housing before they even land, that they have a caseworker that's going to walk in tandem with them for their first months in the United States, that's going to mandate that they get some refugee cash assistance. There are other immigrants that don't have those resources. Now, at the same time, some of those immigrant communities that are welcoming people from their countries that are not refugees might have larger communities, or they might have other resources, or they might have started their own nonprofits, fortunately, to also be a help. But I think that something that's important to me, and others can chime in, is that we don't actually play this us and them, and that we actually just figure out how to welcome and be support of newcomers. And also, if I can speak as a non-immigrant for a second, to not alienate US-born folks in that process, to actually talk about what we share as individuals that unites us, and that we want to have healthcare for all, we want to have good schools for all, and we want to have good jobs for all. So I'll say that.
I'll make one meaningful distinction there, and you know, there's an immigration attorney here. So
Yeah, God.
I'm always a little, I'll try to stay on safe ground. There is a meaningful distinction between a refugee and an asylum seeker, and that really is just where you apply. A refugee applies in a second country, or not usually in a home country because they've usually had to leave, but so if you were Syrian, maybe in Turkey. And they go through that vetting process there. An asylee doesn't have that time, right? So oftentimes, if you're from El Salvador and you are fleeing tremendous gang violence, and it comes in the middle of the night, you know, all of a sudden your husband is murdered by machete, and you need to go because they're going to take your kid next week. And so you flee in the middle of the night. You didn't have time to apply for. Where would you apply for it? So you get to the border, and when you're at the border, you give yourself up to Customs and Border Patrol, and you go through the asylum seeking process right there. There's also some real challenges with that in the way we define who is in danger and who's not in danger, but there is that's the main difference.
Yeah, I would say, I guess from a legal perspective, the distinction is quite significant, just because refugees and asylees, the standard to obtain refugee or asylee status is incredibly high. So there are so many immigrants who have faced some type of persecution, but that doesn't necessarily rise to the level or give them a pathway for asylum or refugee status.
We've heard so much in the news, especially within this last week, about DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and also the temporary protection status. El Salvador is one of the countries that's so affected about that. What challenges will both those communities and our greater community, what will our society face if these programs are ended? And where do we see that?
Do you want to start on your side, Amy?
Sure.
Yeah.
So DACA and temporary protective status, TPS, are both kind of similar in that neither is sort of an official status. They both essentially just provide protection from deportation, not necessarily, they do not provide a pathway to immigration. So DACA is a protection for people who were brought to the United States as children. There are a lot of other requirements for DACA. Whereas TPS is a designation for countries that have, in cases of civil conflict, or some environmental or catastrophic kinds of disasters. So with DACA, I think people have probably heard in the news, first the Trump administration terminated the DACA program, and just recently in January, one of the California federal courts found that the termination was arbitrary and capricious and in violation of federal law. And then likewise in February, the New York federal court found essentially the same thing. So as a result, the immigration is supposed to continue accepting DACA renewal applications. But in general, what I've been telling everyone is that DACA is just up in the air. We don't know what's going to happen. We kind of have to see if Congress steps in and comes up with something to either provide DACA recipients a pathway to immigration, or if the program is extended. With TPS, it's country specific, so a country is designated for TPS, and that is, each country has a different time that it's designated and a different expiration date. Probably people have heard about the El Salvador because it was recently announced that the termination date will be coming up in 2019, I believe. Again, I think the problem faced with these programs is that they're really temporary and they're just protection from deportation, but they don't actually give people a pathway to stay here permanently. In the case of El Salvador, these are people who have been here since 2001, if not earlier, and so they've built their lives over the last, more than 15 years. The idea that this program will end and that they'll, be forced to either leave or upend their lives is very daunting.
And to answer your question on the second part, Ellen, of how it affects them. So today, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a trustee of Middlesex Community College, and we have a lot of students that are undocumented and that are affected by this. And these kids, they work 2 or 3 jobs to go to school. They go hungry, and then you have this where they have to experience this as well. Their lives are up in the air. I mean, I can't imagine being in their shoes. I can't imagine how I would feel being scared to be sent back to a place where it's dangerous. There's no opportunities, and for me, it's like I'm blessed to be here, and so today they had this rally, and they spoke about it, and I kept on thinking, like, what would I do if I was in their shoes? If that was my child, it makes me sad that they have to go through this, because in addition to everything else that they have to go through, this is another thing that, to get them scared. And even, my mother who came here legally, who doesn't really understand English still, and she's hearing all of this. And even though she came here legally, she shouldn't be afraid. She's afraid to travel. She's afraid to go places. And I'm trying to tell her, I'm like, Mom, like, you can travel. You can go anywhere you want, and you have done nothing wrong. You shouldn't be scared. But the thing is, it's like, you have this elder woman who has lived all her life in war and most of her life was about war and seeing her family being lost and things like that, and to come here, and she can't even enjoy it because she's scared every day, and she's staying in, and that's not right. That's not right for us to make people live like that. And I just, it's
And to that point, I want to add that this is not just about what it will do to DACA recipients and to TPS recipients in Massachusetts. It's what will happen to our state and our economy. Mm-hmm. So right now, the government is in the process of, it's easy to look at somebody and say, well, you didn't come here the right way, and so you deserve what happens to you. This is about removing people's status. We are removing their status where there are 1,000 mortgages held by Salvadorian TPS recipients. They've been here on average 22 years. Haitian recipients of TPS have been here on average of 15 years. 600 of our 800, one of our union of school bus drivers, 600 of the 800 of them are Haitians. Who will drive our kids to school? TPS recipients are overrepresented in elderly care and home health services. Who will take care of grandma? Who will clean office buildings? Who will work at the airport? Because we have over 8,000 TPS recipients in Massachusetts, and if they leave, we had 500 kids that were put in foster care because of deportation in Massachusetts last year. This is a burden on our own economy, that what will happen to them in their pensions, and about 23% of El Salvador's GDP comes from remittances in the United States, and about 30% of Haiti's GDP. Right now, Haiti is recovering from chronic disaster and a cholera outbreak started by the UN. they can't afford to lose 30% of their GDP. They can't afford to lose 1 cent. And El Salvador has a history of violence, and there are a lot of arms there. And we think that the gang violence that is coming out of there is getting better, and we have stemmed the flow of unaccompanied minors at the border. But do you think that we won't be back in that situation if in 3 years, if we take the status of people, take away their ability to care for their families, that they lose their homes, they are not going back to El Salvador, so where will they go? And then their country collapses. It's not that hard to imagine. It's pretty simple dominoes, actually. And so my question is not even, and I feel for these people, but also what will happen to Massachusetts? This is not good for anybody.
You've addressed some of this, but what are the options available for the people who are here who are undocumented? I mean, what are the steps that they can, if you wait in line for citizenship, I'm sure for each country it's different, but what are the options available if some of these people just want to see a light at the end of the tunnel? Or after the tunnel?
It's not a good one, so we're.
I know one way is that you can marry a citizen, but
Don't just marry for immigration purposes.
right. But that's the thing; it's like illegal, and then you're stuck with sometimes it's like you're stuck with someone that you don't love just because you want to be here, and then you're stuck in relationships that.
A healthier option?
So there are very, very limited options for people to obtain status. But there are also, and each sort of way, so there's a family-based immigration, there's employment-based immigration, and then there's refugee and asylee status. There are things like TPS and DACA, and a host of other protections or statuses. So I don't want to give everyone an immigration training here, but what I do tell people is really that they should seek out a good immigration attorney who can go through their entire story and will be able to figure out exactly what paths are available to them. And just as sort of a word of caution, one problem that we have been seeing in legal services is people who have come to us and with the very well-intentioned assistance of pastors or friends or their community members, these are people who have helped them fill out things like asylum applications or other applications. Absolutely do not do that. In immigration, it's a little bit deceiving because it's all forms-based. So you go online and you think, oh, here's a form, I'll just fill out the form and then I'll help this person get asylum. But it absolutely doesn't work like that. Each process tends to be incredibly complicated, incredibly fact-specific, and if the process isn't followed correctly, there can be very dire consequences, often removal or deportation. So as well-intentioned as people are, my biggest point of advice is to seek out a good immigration attorney, even two, because sometimes certain attorneys may not know about sort of these certain niche options for people. We're a free legal services organization, so we're mostly income-based, but there are lots of great immigration attorneys out there. I would seek someone out who has malpractice insurance, which you can look up online. And you can also find attorneys through the American Immigration Lawyers Association, ILA. So I would recommend that as well.
Can I say one thing to that? And everything she said, please heed, please. I think it's fair to say that social service agencies, particularly those serving immigrants and refugees, are woefully underfunded, and even more so now when there's more attention. But if there's one area that really needs to be addressed and have more services, it's legal services. The waiting lists and the inability for me when someone comes in my office for me to get them a lawyer. And this is the one area, the International Institute, we had to lay off staff because of the federal cuts in the refugee resettlement funding and other services last year, which was heartbreaking. But the one area we decided we had to invest in was legal services, because too many of our clients are at risk and they need their green cards and they're getting poor green card advice and they're losing their cases. So That's something we did, but we're just a small bucket. We've got Northeast Leeway, we've got PAIR, we've got CMMA, but everybody's got a waiting list.
Yeah, and I would say in legal services, we have 5 immigration attorneys, so we served, again, the entire Merrimack Valley and North Shore, and we are only able to take a third of the cases that come to us, and even amongst that third, we're only able to provide full representation to a handful of those. So there are many people out there who are in need of assistance, and we just don't have the resources, and I know that's the case for everyone. We try to, find other organizations to step in, and just we're all very overloaded. So the need is there, the resources are not.
Yeah, I also wanted to add that, and everything that the ladies are saying is obviously accurate. However, I'm thinking also the community that I know, that how afraid they are, the fear, because sadly, what's happening also, just because they put an application in, they go to the immigration office, and right then and there, they have an appointment and they're being deported. So even their cases are not even being seen. So they're kind of being tricked to believe, oh, I'm going to see the immigration officer today for an interview, when in reality, what they're being done is being tricked to come to the immigration office. I'm deporting you now. You have no more rights. And after they're there, they have nothing. They can't even call their family. So that makes it very, very difficult.
I'll throw one statistic at you. Between in like the last 5 years, there's about 25,000 cases that have been seen in front of the Boston Immigration Court, which sees the whole, this whole area, and further into New Hampshire and parts of Connecticut as well. And 5% of the cases that we're seeing that didn't have representation, and I will remind you that immigration is a civil action, so it's a civil offense to be here without, like a parking ticket. So you are not, an attorney will not be provided to you. So whether you're 10 years old and coming from Guatemala and fleeing gang violence there, the court thinks it's okay for you to represent yourself against a professional prosecutor. And of those cases where there wasn't an attorney, only 5% of those cases were successful. Where there was an attorney there and present to represent the person, about 49% of those cases were successful. So when we think about this, the black and the white, illegal, legal, this is really gray. Oftentimes, we had a wonderful fellow that worked with us over the summer. Her father came from Mexico because he had a fellowship at Harvard. She didn't know she was undocumented until she was 18 and started applying for scholarships and for college. So it's really easy to think about this in black and white, but it's really not that way. And the more that we can get people representation, and I would say especially children and people who are afraid to return to their home country, it does a tremendous difference. And even that, it's getting harder and harder to win those asylum cases. And there's major backlogs, which is why you may see that the numbers say that we're not deporting as many people, but that's because we're holding them in detainment. And the Supreme Court just ruled yesterday that it is totally lawful and constitutional to hold somebody for unlimited time in detainment without possibility of bail.
Yeah, I also want to add to what Lisa was talking about. Imagine you living all your life in the United States, that English is basically your main language. And all of a sudden, you have to go to a Spanish country that you know your family come from, that you don't even know the people there, and all of a sudden you're just deported to a complete new place that you can't even communicate. When in reality, now you were raised pretty much in this country. You're more an American than when you were, that when your family was from. So I can talk about my daughters. My daughters, obviously born in the United States. I try to move them to El Salvador, they will be completely a fish out of water. Even though they speak Spanish, people will know automatically that they're not from there because their Spanish is not the same as theirs. And in their case, they even have it worse. because they have a mix of Puerto Rican and Salvadorian, which is a complete so think about a person from Massachusetts and a person from South America, from United States in the South. Put them together, you have a huge mix.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Rosie, actually, I've answered pretty much the question
Yeah.
that the group who organized this evening asked, but you know, this impact on families, especially children, of the policies that we have in this country for immigration. Just speak to that and what the next steps are for us.
Well, I can say, and I can't talk in terms of servicing, but I can talk in terms of my community and what I see. And I'm sorry. I get very emotional because this is something that I'm passionate about. I care about people. So I see this young lady, wonderful artist. Her family's from Mexico, and she's pretty much grown in this country. She can't go to college. I know this young lady since she was a little kid. She went to school with my younger daughter. And I see her opportunities being trumped. And it makes me very sad. Because we're saying no to good people. And on top of that, we're calling them criminals. And that to me is unacceptable. As Lisa was saying, this is a civil offense. It's not a criminal offense. And we need to make sure we're clear about that. There's a big difference between doing something like killing a person and trying to better your life. Sorry.
Yeah, no, Rosa, I mean, no one can say it better than you at this point, but I will say that when I was making my notes for the speech tonight, I wrote anxious, frustrated, and fearful. Because that's how it's been in our office for many of our clients for the last year since the election, and most specifically since the original travel ban. Some of you know that I got my career started in Lewiston, Maine, when 2,500 Somali refugees moved in right after 9/11. And we had a mayor that was, to say he was not welcoming would be polite. He wrote a letter saying they shouldn't be there. And I thought that was gonna be the hardest time of my career. I thought, you know, your hometown, you drew hate groups. I never imagined that that little microcosm of experience would be a national story 20 years later. And the irony for me was that 20 years ago, I stood in my office and I had a Somali man walk in who hadn't read the letter. He didn't know what happened. He actually walked to my office and was like, Hakuna Matata. And I was like, it was a thing we did. And I was like, oh, that's awkward. So I had to sit him down and tell him what the mayor wrote that said that Somalis weren't welcome. Fast forward 18 years, I was sitting in my office when the travel ban came out. The phone started ringing from the Times and CNN and BBC, just like I'm sure your office did. And the first woman that walked in my office was a Somali woman. Cheerful, bright-eyed, smiling. She always smiles. She's one of our clients and soon became our interpreter and now has 3 wonderful children that she's raising. And I looked at her, I was like, you're really happy for today. And she said, what do you mean? And I had to have her sit down, and I had to have her tell her what happened with the travel ban. And the reason I didn't want to have to tell her, because her mother was supposed to come to this country from Somalia, who she hasn't seen for 22 years. And now, even though the travel ban's overturned, they're not processing cases. Her case is going to expire, and it's going to take 4, 6, 8, possibly another decade, if ever, to bring her mother here. So we're separating families, even those who have the legal right to come to this country. And then, I mean, I can go on, wax on and on about the moral imperative, but like, just the numbers are ridiculous. We welcomed 2.2 million Cambodians in the 80s to this country after the war. We can't bring in 25,000 refugees at a time when there's more refugees in the world than ever before. There's just something upside down about that.
And it, you know, in terms of children, I think I have kids, and then for me, I just feel, you know, I want to do all that I can to protect my kids. And, you know, when these stuff, you know, you have children being harassed because, you know, people want to find their parents and breaking their, it's just, you know, I think we really, I understand you know, I understand the laws of it, but I think we really need to use common sense and really be, I don't know, you know, I think, for me, I can't imagine my kids being stalked and harassed because someone want to find me and deport me and take me out, and it's just, you know, and it's not right. It affects them, and then, you know, kids go through certain things already. We really don't need to do this to them. We really don't need to break their families, and we should nurture them. So yeah.
You talk about the fear and the anxiety of people that walk into your offices every single day. Let us talk about the fear of people who truly believe that their jobs are going to go away because of these people, and that this is going to change the society that they have known, and they're fearful and they feel threatened. How do we respond to that? What are the facts of that situation?
That's right. Sure, we'll bounce back. I do have stats, but go keep.
Yeah, no, you start with
All
stats.
right.
I'll go stories.
Okay, let's take a breath because this is actually the good news part of the whole thing, okay? I am always uncomfortable, particularly when talking about refugees, because it's what I work in, to make it sound like we should bring them because it benefits us. Like, it's just an awkward statement. But at the same time, as Liza and other people have said, we all get lifted up by immigration. So obviously in the last year, there's been a lot of attention to justify keeping refugees and immigrants out of this country, which also means, wonderfully, a lot of think tanks have been writing about and studying and saying, really, what is the impact on this country? One statistic, in 9 years, refugee resettlement, this is my area, refugees contributed $65 billion more in economic revenue to this country than they received in public benefits. I mean, that's a huge impact, right? In 8 years, now that may sound like a long time, it's like, you know, high school and college. In 8 years is the point where a refugee will go from receiving benefits, on average, receiving benefits to tripling their contributions to this country. And these are people that when we place them are getting $11.50, $12.50, $13.50 an hour, but within 8 years have moved up so rapidly because they work so hard, they're so resilient. Companies love them. We have a company that just literally, honestly, they make ketchup packets. It's not the most sexy job to sell to a refugee and say, really, you want to make ketchup packets. But when we tell them why they should work at that company, we talk about the employer. That this employer goes so above and beyond that he's helped his employees learn how to save money in this country and how to buy houses. He has parties on the weekends because he believes that they're lifting up Lowell. And we have so many companies like that. In Massachusetts, if we don't invest in immigrants, we are all going to suffer, as you said. Yeah. Right now, 50% of people starting businesses in this country are immigrants. 50%. Sorry, actually, no. 50% more likely. Sorry, 50% more likely. 40% of Forbes businesses are led by immigrants. Now, I know, particularly because I'm Lewiston, Maine, that's economically challenged, that there are people that are worried about their jobs. But the thing is, we've found that in communities like Lowell particularly, who have invested in immigrant businesses, that has attracted other people and it's attracted more businesses. We're about to have a symposium in the fall in Lowell as part of our 100th anniversary where we're going to talk about the economic impact in the Merrimack Valley because of refugees and immigrants. We've just started our research and we found out that there's 400 immigrant small businesses in Lowell. It just doesn't rise to the statistics because you talk about Kronos and Aramark and other manufacturing plants, but that's a huge benefit. And, you know, has great restaurants and culture and the folk festival. I mean, I can go on, but I want to talk.
Yeah, I want to. Ursula, do you want to say something?
I work in the human resources field, and my company in particular, I'm not going to mention their name, but they're a retail business. And we are having difficulty hiring people.
Yeah.
We have a store in Westford that we have people that we need to come and work for us. And, you know, like that, we have a store that we're opening in Waltham, and right now we're interviewing people to come and work with us. So I can't understand when people say these people are stealing our jobs when we have jobs openings and people are not applying for them.
I'll be there tomorrow with our clients.
This is good. Network.
The old
And I will say say though that, we can sometimes gloss over the fact that there has been a real change in our economy. It's not necessarily felt in parts of Massachusetts, but there are, think about all of the beautifully redone mills in Lowell, and the way that things changed and how people had to transition out of that type of work. That is painful. It is painful that you can't get a union job and assume that your kids are going to do better than you in that generation. My generation is the first generation that will do less well than our parents. That's real. That's a real feeling. That's a real disappointment when you have figured or been sold on this idea that we're going up. It's only this direction. And, whether that's global trade agreements or the shift in our economies and technology, there are a lot of factors there, but it's always really easy to pick one person or one group of people. We're really good at humans at doing that. And saying, well, you're the reason, instead of, actually, there are a lot of reasons. And maybe we need to all get together and figure out how we can make this better for everybody. Maybe that in the United States, we should spend more on education than we do on defense. And so, those are real problems. And I don't want to gloss over the fact that, that wages are stagnant, that the rent is too damn high. and it is hard for people to pay that. And it's so much easier to blame somebody else than to get involved and to change the system. Because the system doesn't want to be changed, because it is working for some people. And I think I've been in a lot of countries that have failed. I've been in a lot of conflict zones. When I saw what was coming down the road in 2016, I looked at all my friends who were from Venezuela, my friends who watched Syria dissolve, who are from South Africa and have watched it, attempt to head towards democracy. And we went, yeah, seen this before. And it was scary. But that's something we all have to fight together. And it's not just about being pro-immigrant or pro-refugee. We need to be pro each other, pro raising the minimum wage, pro making living wages, pro lifting each other up and building communities that support each other. Because that is really the problem. And it's not any of us who are sitting up here, or communities that we might represent. We're here to build a solution together, but we shouldn't forget that there is a problem, and we each have some role in fixing it, including immigrants.
Can we now hear from some of the people who want to be part of that solution? I do happen to know that there are 2 students here from Westwood Academy who wanted to ask a question of you. And so I lost them, but they were what do you do about microphones at this particular point? Should they be using one of these mics?
This one.
Just one
Yeah.
Just tell us who you are and then present your question if you would. And please, ladies.
Real one?
Hello, my name is Mabel Bonatti, and I'm Prachi Jabbar, and we're from Westwood Academy's Human Rights Club. We're both seniors at the school right now. And so
We both have questions, yeah.
my first question is, with the rise of the new administration, the immigrants in our country are now facing more misconceptions and hatred than ever before. And if confronted about being a foreigner or not belonging to this country, how would you respond in such a way that battles these misconceptions? And how would you say is the best way to continue conversations like these to ensure that more of America is informed about who immigrants are and the situations that they come from?
Ladies?
Well, I have to say, what an excellent question.
We all just took a
your
breath.
question, because this has been one of my...
Repeat the question?
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I think the microphone is not on.
Yeah, it's not working.
Oh, it's there. They were just
Essentially, in an age where there's heightened okay.
Try this one.
My question once again
There he is.
is, with the rise of the new administration, the immigrants in our country are now facing more misconceptions and hatred than ever before. If confronted about being a foreigner or not belonging to this country, how would you respond in such a way that battles these misconceptions? How would you say is the best way to continue conversations like these to ensure that more of America is informed about who immigrants are and the situations that they come from?
So how to respond if confronted, and then how to continue the discussion.
And like I said, I think it's an excellent question. And I'm going to go back in history in my personal life. I used to live in Springfield, Massachusetts, and I used to go to the Springfield Technical Community College there. And I always remember having a classmate that I wanted her to come to my home. And I live in the Spanish community that supposedly is the bad neighborhood. And I invited her to come over and said, oh no, I can't go there. And I said, okay, so I'll come to you. So I went visit her and we studied together. I remember it was for calculus class. And then I invited her again to come to my home. And she said, yes, I'll come. When she come to my home, we studied together. I served her food and she shared with my family. At the end of that visit, she said, Rosa, I never imagined it this way. I never imagined this way. What I mean by that is that we need to share more together. We need to get out of our comfort zone and share with those communities that we're not familiar with. Because it's easy for me to share with my Puerto Rican family than it is with my even Salvadorian family. Because I relate better with my Puerto Rican family, okay? But at the same time, by me sharing with my Salvadorian family, now I am also part of that. The same thing with my Anglo-American family, because to me, every single person is part of my family. So I work with Anglos, I work with Indians, I work with Puerto Ricans, I work with Salvadorians, Guatemalans. It doesn't matter in the end, because to me, they're all human beings. So if we want to eliminate the stereotype, we have to share together, be together, accept each other in our differences. And at least that's how I experienced it. Because when I came to the United States, I also had stereotypes. Stereotypes from all the different groups. And I had to change that to where I am today. That I'm able to accept people from different places, from different religions, refugees. It doesn't really matter in the end. It's not about where you come from. It's about human beings.
I totally agree. You know, I think trying to think in a way for myself, I know that, you know, when
louder, please.
Sorry. No, it's okay. I think just, you know, because obviously...
You're a little softer.
Sorry, so, you know, I'm just trying to think for myself in a way where, you know, it comes from within you, where, for example, if there's myths, there's misconception about who you are and things like that, for myself, I try to say, okay, well, you know, I'm not going to react. I'm just going to listen to where that is coming from. And, you know, I think if you come from a place where you're not reacting and you're just trying to understand why, you know, why why people think or think that way of you, and then and also, you know, in my experience, same thing, being able to share and allowing people to see, like, you know, there's different people. There's people that do bad things. There's people that do good things. Not just immigrants, not just you know, it's everyone. But you know, in the work that I do in the Greater Lowell area, one of my colleague Yunju Choi is here tonight. Actually, we do work together with the Cambodian Mutual Assistance Association, Coalition for a Better Acre. Working cities, we come together and we talk about this very often, about bringing people together. And same thing as what you said, we have dinner together. You know, when people eat together, they talk, they understand each other. So I think just trying not to react. You know, there's, and everyone have to take that stance within themselves and saying, you know what, whatever is being said about my people or where I came from, I'm not gonna like it, but you know, really, it's not me. It's not who my family is. We are tough people that have gone through so much and have been here and we've contributed, and that's not even true. But you know what? You came from a place where you were, you were cheated, and I get it. But the thing is, so I would say come from a place where don't react to it, but listen and try to explain and help people to understand, because I wouldn't want to create, I think we need to unite as opposed to being divided and getting upset over myths and things like that, because it's understandable if you grew up with certain perception, if you grew up with certain feelings, then it's hard, and you have to help each other through it.
Sure, question.
Yes, I also typed it out.
More prepared than me.
So, as a high school student, I know that many of my peers have misconceptions regarding immigration, specifically that all people who file for immigration have an equal opportunity to get legal documents to enter the United States. And since we've been in Human Rights Club, we have dipped our toe a little bit into immigration. And I know that there's some people who have higher advantages over other people in order to come to this country. So I was wondering if any of you amazing women could speak to those advantages and elaborate on that.
Amazing woman, number one.
Well, I mean, I guess in terms of advantages,
Use the mic, please.
I guess in terms of advantages, they may be speaking about different priorities, for instance, that are in family-based immigration. So in family-based immigration, there are certain relatives that have a higher priority than others. So like immediate relatives like spouses, parents, and children come before someone's brother. So they may be talking about that. I would say in general, there are also limits on how many people from certain countries can come and things like that. So it's definitely not an equal system for everyone who applies. But again, it also is, a lot of the pathways to immigration are very, very fact specific. So even, one person from one country has a totally different factual story than another person, and they may have a better chance at, or more options for immigration that way as well.
Amazing woman number 2, who's gonna?
I will say that.
Please, the microphone.
Yes, I would love to. I will do whatever you ask, moderator. I will say that our country has gone through subsequent periods of where we have really limited immigration, whether that's the Chinese Exclusion Act, and so there is an ebb and a flow that is based on labor. That is who we want in this country to do whatever job, whether that's farm working or rebuilding things, and it also has to do with fear and who we might be at war with at that particular time. And so, right now is a moment that is like many moments that we've seen in the United States where, even the travel ban and excluding particular people or stopping the visa lottery, which allowed, my friend who's from Turkey who works in our office, who is LGBTQ to leave Turkey and not face persecution under the Erdogan administration there. It's a political function. Immigration is inherently political in most countries, but also here. And so sometimes when we're afraid of people or afraid of a country, we say, you can't come here. And it is very difficult for most people to immigrate to the United States in a lawful manner in anything that we would even consider timely. 20 years is not really timely, or 22 years is not timely. And so that is very significant. And immigration law, I will just point out, and bravo to our one immigration attorney here for fielding all of those questions. Immigration law is so complex that if you are not especially trained as an immigration attorney, it is unlawful if you are an attorney to practice it. So, it's changing all the time. The book every year is that thick, and it is because it's inherently a political thing, and it's about labor, and it's about how we feel about ourselves. So.
Thank you.
I'd like to add to this, and I think
No, we've been commanded.
Yeah. I'm commanded. I'd like to add, and this is my personal experience.
applying for immigration is very expensive. It's not cheap.
Yeah.
And if you think about the people that are coming here illegal to this country, it's because they can't afford it.
Yeah.
So if we make immigration expensive, how are we expecting these individuals to come up with that kind of money to apply? I know, me personally, I have spent over $10,000 in applying for immigration for my own family. And that's without an attorney, because I did it myself. Regardless what these people said.
She's the lucky one. Don't follow her example.
I did it myself. I applied myself. Now, I have to say, Mira did help my husband and my mother-in-law to get their U.S. citizenship. So thank you, Mira, for helping.
That's really funny.
And that's, like I said, if you hire an attorney, then you could pretty much double, triple, make it triple the expense. So you could be talking about $30,000 or more.
Yeah.
And these are families that are trying to feed their family, put a roof over their head, put shoes and clothes on. I mean, yeah, I think our immigration system could use some changes.
So polite.
David, your question? Thank you so much.
I was wondering if you could just elaborate.
Right in the microphone.
Place this one. You can go. Yeah.
I'm interested in understanding more, getting a bit of a picture of detainment. Someone like describing immigrants being detained. I'm not sure I really understand what that picture looks like. Where are they being detained? By whom? Who's paying for that? And who benefits? And I'll let available.
Yeah.
So for those who the microphones are working, but the question is about detainment. How does that work? Who does it apply to? Where are they detained? What is the cost of all of that? Liza? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, Amy.
At the ready.
So we're getting a lot of questions about detainment because there are a lot more stories about people being detained. So I'll just start by saying that actually, the immigration laws themselves haven't changed, but the administration's directions about how those immigration laws are enforced have changed. So now ICE is going after a lot more people than it used to. So if anyone who has a criminal history, people are getting picked up at courthouses. I would say that's the biggest one now. And that could be situations where someone's involved in a domestic violence dispute. They get picked up at the courthouse for trying to defend or prosecute a domestic violence problem, and that's really unfortunate. We're also hearing stories about workplace raids, and even people just getting ICE knocking on people's doors in the community. Immigrants are being detained in just local detention centers. Once people are in there, it's almost like they disappear. It is incredibly difficult for them to get access to the outside. We do regular detention center visits to try to get in touch with these people. They are typically housed sort of still in the jail, but kind of a little bit separate. But often it's not like we're getting calls from the detention centers frequently. To make the calls, it's incredibly expensive, or they can only call collect. So we're really relying on family members who know that their family member has been detained, where they've been detained, and hopefully the family member also has a host of other information that would help us figure out what their situation is.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk quickly about, similar as we've talked about the industrialization and people making money off the criminal justice system, there has been a lot of private investment in detention centers. And so who pays for that? Well, we do. We pay as a state oftentimes for the people that are being held for a very long period of time. I believe the cost of 3 months of Francisco, if anybody heard the case of the MIT janitor that was held and finally released, yay, we win one. So many more to go. And there's been a stay on his deportation. But it cost about $12,000 to the taxpayer for his detainment of like 3.5, 4 months. And so it's very expensive. Detention of non-criminal nature. So people who have not committed a crime, but they are deportable. So they've overstayed their visa or something like that. We are up by 300% in Massachusetts. So because ICE previously had priorities, or it was called the PEP, the Priority Enforcement Program, not followed perfectly, but typically not going after, grandma who's selling pupusas or, who are cleaning, who hasn't really committed any crime. Now those people are being targeted. And like I said before, because our Supreme Court ruled that somebody can be held in detention indefinitely. And so who's paying for that? We're paying for that. We're paying to lock these people up for a very long time. And I will echo, once somebody goes in detention, if they don't have an immigration attorney, their number memorized, they can disappear and families will be separated and kids will be separated from their mom. And we are rife with human rights abuses in this arena. And it's something that we really have to think about. And I will also give one shout out to our lovely sheriffs who are in the South who have signed agreements with the federal government to act as ICE agents. It's called the 287G agreement. And they will say that they are balancing their budget of their jail by detaining immigrants. That is because they get a certain amount of dollars for the beds that they provide in their jail. But it also means that now they are detaining people who have very low level of priority because they're trying to balance their budget. And that just feels wrong and icky.
We have lots of questions, so I get Ed, you next.
My name is Ed Spaulding. I had a question for Bopa. You spoke of the Middlesex Community College, and I wondered where DACA folks aren't eligible for the federal student loans, how they manage school expenses. And I had a question for Amy. I wondered what pushes people over the line into criminal? Where does it go from civil to criminal? What sort of problems do they run into be here undocumented that then might put them into a criminal category?
So Bofa, the first question is for you. How do the students who are at Middlesex Community College pay for their tuition? What is the arrangement?
Well, I mean, they get help. We have some funds that we fundraise and we can help, but at the same time it's very difficult. As I mentioned, they work, but not being able to get what they need, they probably have to not, sometimes they're not going to be they're not going to be able to fulfill their education. And that's very sad. So, and we're doing all of what we can to support them, but we're seeing that, that they're not. So we are looking in other ways and being creative, but it is a very tough situation for them because obviously. Before already, they're facing that problem already, and now it's an added burden to them. And we're doing all that we can to find ways to support and help them, but at the same time, it's tough.
If I can get real quick to that one. Undocumented students in the state of Massachusetts are not eligible for financial aid, and they are not eligible for in-state tuition at any public college. That's unlike many other progressive or democratic states who do offer in-state tuition or tuition equity. So for example, if you came here at 4 years old and started in Westward Elementary and you graduated at 18, you are like an international student when you apply to college, which is a burden that is very heavy. 60% of our valedictorians and salutatorians in Boston were undocumented youth, many of them girls. And to look a 17-year-old in the face and know that their options are either to give up on college or to marry an American citizen at 18 years old is a truly heartbreaking thing in a state that's supposed to lead an education. So that is something, the good news is that you can fix that. There is a bill, it has been sent to study over and over and over again in Massachusetts on in-state tuition equity that would just say, hey, if they're here and they're contributing, maybe we do them the solid of just saying, yeah, you don't have to pay extra. And that would be really, really helpful, except for our legislature has refused to move on it again and again and again. So if you think that that's terrible, call your legislator and tell them so, because we would love them to get a little heat on that issue, because in this moment when all of them have signed all sorts of resolutions about DACA and spoken up, and not a peep about actually what we could do very easily here in Massachusetts to give tangible help to those wonderful students who are trying to contribute, and we're putting up more roadblocks for them. If Texas can do it, we can do it.
Ed's second question was to you, Amy, and it had to do about, actually, I didn't quite understand it, so I hope that you did, but the transition from civil to criminal, where you see that happening.
So I think as Liza explained, there's no criminality to immigration or lack of status. It's never criminal. So if you enter without inspection, meaning you just came over the border, no visa, that's not criminal. It's a purely civil matter. So the only way that immigrants become criminals is like how anyone becomes a criminal, which is by committing a crime. So it's that simple.
At the mic, please.
Thank you so much for your advocacy for DACA. I want to actually talk about a slightly different form of injustice in the immigration system, and I think you guys alluded to that a little bit already. I want to talk about children whose parents came here typically on employment-based immigration visas, and whose green cards got approved, but they are not able to actually receive them due to these discriminative country-wise quotas, and in many cases they have to wait for 70 years to obtain these green cards, which is, in most cases, they might die before they actually get the green card. And their children, if they came here, if they were not born here as citizens, if they came here, whose parents came here legally, they might age out at the age of 21, I believe, right? It's 18 or 21, I'm not sure which one. And they basically lose their status. This is one of those issues that is very less focused in the media. And I think most communities are not aware of that. This is besides the point of what the parents go through, which is to wait, indefinitely and live in that kind of uncertainty. In my case, I've lived here 15 years in the US, and I'm still facing that same set of uncertainty. But I think especially the children, if we are going to be talking about injustice, simply because of the fact that their parents were born in a particular country. What are we doing about that? And as a community, how do we raise awareness around this?
Do you want to address that? Is that an area of expertise that's not you have?
I have actually not ever really heard that story before, so thank you. Afterwards, and I'd love to, I've got some contacts at the Globe. We'll see if we can raise the profile.
I didn't want to take up.
No, please, because we're going to have continue the conversation at 9, and everybody's names are on it. So please follow up with that. That would
Way to raise.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for raising our awareness on that. And the last question before we, yes, please come.
I wasn't really sure what to expect with the forum. I'm very interested in immigration. I've worked in healthcare, specifically in home care, for 32 years in the Greater Lowell area, and I've certainly worked with a lot of immigrants. And I have to say I've been quite disappointed in how one-sided this whole forum has been. Because if it was really so perfect and so positive, then there would be no question or no argument about anything else as far as immigration, and you wouldn't have people who don't feel that it's always such a positive thing to have all this illegal immigration. Take, for instance, the family members who've had their own family members killed or raped and so on by illegal immigrants. And, the whole refugee versus immigrant, I've had plenty of patients who do have refugee status. They are not coming from war-torn nations, but they do get fast-tracked with certainly housing and all the other benefits. And not to mention just the immigration and illegal immigration in general. It's a $2 billion cost to the taxpayers just in this state. $2 billion, it's $135 billion annually for the country, yes it is. They do have some taxes that are paid as well as Social Security, but when you back that out, that still leaves $116 billion that we, the taxpayers, are paying for this. There are a lot of legal immigrants, a lot of citizens who cannot afford college, who cannot afford housing, a lot of homeless vets, and they're giving up their housing basically because you get all of these illegals who are moving in. And I don't think that these overcrowded schools in these cities are really thinking it's all positive either. Take the city of Lynn, where you're having to convert closets to classroom space because they just don't have enough room for these people. So, so with those people coming in and they don't speak English and any number of other, it's not just Spanish, but many other languages as well, and the native-born and legal population are suffering as a result because there's just not enough taxpayer dollars to go around. So it's not a financial net positive by any stretch of the imagination. We, the taxpayers, are bearing much more of a burden than is being paid by these people who are coming here illegally. And we do have the right to, every other country has, they have their own laws as far as immigration goes. And you can't just move into Mexico and decide you're going to get housing, healthcare, food, and education. You just won't. So why should we, as American taxpayers, pay for everybody? I mean, it would be nice, and it'd be a perfect world if everybody who was poor could move here and we could take care of them. Well, we can't. There are a lot of people born here who are still living in poverty. Their lives aren't getting improved. They're definitely not. All the crime, how about the MS-13 gangs? Okay, there's plenty out there, but you don't find that talked about on CNN and so on. You don't talk about, those people prey on these immigrant communities. They're not sitting in Westford. They're not in Chelmsford. No, they're in Boston. They're in Lynn. They're all over the big cities, all over the country. And they're committing plenty of crimes.
Do you want to turn this into a question at the end? Because I'm certainly going to let your statement stand, and I thank you for your thoughts.
My question is, why, okay, I guess I started with the question.
Please.
Why is this so one-sided, and why was the other side not invited to provide, the other side of why this is a topic that does get people inflamed?
I don't think that's fair to ask that question of these women because all they did was accept the invitation to come. But I think the committee that put this together, and if you would like to speak to that, Beth, I would be glad to let you do that, or we could have this conversation because, she's absolutely right. We have her advocates for change. And so do you want to explain why you chose the people that you invited, or would you rather not do that in this?
Well, I can...
Wait, could you just come
Oh, sure.
Yep. This is Beth Peterson. Beth introduced you, and she was one of the Justice Committee with Tom Plank, who will explain to you why they did invite who they did and why they set the tone and the questions that they asked for.
I'm going to keep that coming. I think it's true that the community that's supporting this event was interested in some of these issues, some of the ways to engage and act for change. We're very happy to have people come here and ask these questions, though. So you're very welcome. We wanted this to be a community discussion, but when we put together the list, we looked at people that we've been exposed to, who've been active in the community, speaking out, and we invited them to come, and we were lucky to get them to accept.
Right, I would agree with Tom that we really looked around for the organizations in our community that are out there on the front lines, working with immigrants, working with the legal issues, helping out when refugees come to this country. We really did a good search on those organizations and invited the people to come who we felt were on the front lines. And,
And I don't think we made a claim that it was going to be, universally respecting, every single view, and so we're glad to have those views here. One thing I will mention is there's an excellent set of handouts that you received that has some basic facts that you may find interesting related to crime rates in different populations, economic impact. So please take a look at that if you're interested in just sort of supplementing your own statistical facts on this topic. And maybe we can turn this back to the next person in line.
Actually, we'd like to have
Real quick rebuttal, very, very fast.
not a rebuttal.
Okay, a response. There we go. Sorry. I really appreciate your comments because I think it would be remiss of us to gloss over, and I won't say other facts because some of the figures that you saw, I'm very well aware of this, the $2 billion. I know exactly where that number comes from. That comes from FAIR. Southern Poverty Law Center has deemed them a hate group. I'm sorry, but and to your question about services, you said that immigrants, receive health care and that they receive food and rent, and I will just say they don't, and so that's okay. We do provide right now, but the government is trying to stop that. We do allow women who have U.S. born children to apply for WIC, and I think that's pretty reasonable. They are U.S. born children, but I will let and I'd be happy to talk through some of where you've got your information from and compare. I welcome discussion. I think the thing that is wrong in this debate right now is to gloss over the fact that things like MS-13 does exist, and they are terrible. We did create it in LA in our own jails, but they are terrible, and they do prey.
Created from these illegal aliens from Central America.
And I would be totally happy to talk about the best ways that we can do better enforcement so that we can deal with that in a way that is just and that is law abiding. And I welcome that discussion.
I just want to say two things, and I second that. Thank you for speaking up. We're not going to get anywhere if we don't speak to each other. Two things I want to say is that I'm sorry if we've ever given the impression that this is a positive experience all the time. It is not as complicated. Refugee resettlement is the most complicated work I've ever done because it touches on everything from living standards to love, and it touches on integration with other residents. So it is not easy. It is a complicated work. Integration is complicated. So first and foremost. And the second thing is just very specifically, you said you worked in healthcare. I think that's great. We were approached as a refugee resettlement agency last year by 5 healthcare providers, the 5 largest in Massachusetts, by the state of Massachusetts Elder Care, by Middlesex Community College, and by the Department of Labor, because they cannot get people in healthcare. They're offering free courses to American-born people. They're offering free courses to our clients because there's going to be a 25% shortage as we age in healthcare providers that are going to take care of us. So this is actually an example where it's not about immigrant versus non-immigrant. It's about how do we care for each other. So if you're in healthcare, we should sit down and talk about how do we get people working together so that all of us are taken care of.
The last gentleman there, and I'm not sure how you want to do this because we're getting over past 9 o'clock. Is that okay, madam? Okay.
Can I grab the mic?
Yeah. Moderator's pretty tough up here.
I actually want to say I like this forum. I'm African. I live in Westwood. I've been here like about 19 years. And I went to school at Middlesex too. So. And I knew when I came into this country, I had a few friends that were from the war-torn countries in Africa. Mm-hmm. And I just want people to understand, I'm not against what you said here because we all need to listen to each other. And that's one of the problems with this country. And I feel like if you've never been in anybody's shoes, you should never judge them. It's hard. I'm not saying you. No, I'm not saying you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying if you've never been in anybody's shoes, don't judge them. I understand there are laws for a reason, and, you know, I mean, people have to go, I mean, I came here legally, but the reason why I came here was for me to get a better life. I mean, I have 2 kids that go to school in this town, and for me, I just like what you guys are bringing here, educating people. And if someone have like an idea that doesn't go well with what you guys are bringing, it's okay for us to talk.
Yeah.
And that is why you have people in Washington that are not talking. You know, we're here to talk to fix situations.
Absolutely.
And I really like that. I just thought I'd let you guys know.
Thank you.
And I'm going to make this the last speaker because the church clock just told us it's 9 o'clock.
Church clock
Can't
never
away
lies.
from it here. It's very clear. So the microphone is yours.
Thank you. Anyway, good evening. I want to thank you for everything you've shared with us tonight. I also want to thank the woman who, my sense was people thought what she said was very controversial. And the reason I kind of feel compelled to come up and speak before you is because I've spent the last 30 years of my life in the construction field. I own a small painting and carpentry company. I've also spent about 5 years, I did a quick calculation, working in restaurants in San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and in Boston. And I've been around a lot of illegal people. And illegal people are not treated very well. So I feel terrible that they're not treated very well, and they are exploited. So I think, from my perspective, ensuring that all of our workers are treated fairly is of high priority. Yes, there's a selfish part of that for me, because when everyone is treated fairly, then they're often paid fairly, and then I can be competitive with them.
Absolutely.
I'm very fortunate that I have a successful business, but I could go on. You have wonderful stories about immigrants that have suffered, and I could share lots of stories of native-born people who have suffered because they can't compete and left the field. I'm on the advisory committee to the Lowell Technical School in the painting and decorating program. And we're trying to get young Americans, legal people of all colors, to come to the painting and decorating field because it's a wonderful field. There's paint everywhere.
You got it.
Let's be honest, they're reluctant to, because it's a field that is easy entry, oftentimes low, unskilled workers who happen to be illegal. And it's known in the trades, it's just known. It's vulgar how native-born people, and even people who come here and have legal status from different countries, they may be, I don't want to single out anyway, they could be Polish or Irish, and they're here illegally. And they run their business illegally. They take work away from me just like someone who might come from another country that is more in the news lately. So we need to solve this issue, but I think to demonize those who, maybe I don't know this woman's facts are correct, but I'm sympathetic to some of the comments about the effects that illegal immigration has. So I don't have any answers, but I just wanted to present my position, so it's, so everyone can feel that there's a, I don't know, bear witness to the people's.
Okay. I'd be happy to talk about that afterwards.
Great. Diane?
Thank you very much, all of you. We were also going to talk about call to action. So I have a question.
One statement?
Well, what can
we do have the last question that we were going to get to.
The one we're going to do at 29, that one?
What can the audience do? Any suggestions and ideas moving forward? So you have quickly suggestions.
Rosie, you want to start with that?
Yeah,
And just go
I'll
down
start.
the table of two brilliant ideas of what
I think you're doing exactly what we need to do today. We need to educate ourselves. We need to open our minds and share with the different communities. Get to know people. Participate. For example, I can vouch for the Merrimack Valley Project. Merrimack Valley Project is an organization that empowers communities. And we work, it's a religious-based organization where we have different religious groups united in a common, looking for social justice. And the best part about what my organization does is that we empower the communities. It's not Merrimack doing the job, it's the community working on what they want to work. And if immigration is what you want to work, if immigration is what you want to support, then I invite you to be part of that. Right now, on March 19, we have a vigil at JFK in Boston, Massachusetts, where at 8 o'clock we're going to be supporting an immigrant who is right now in the process of being deported. And this is how we can show our support to these individuals that need to know that they are wanted, that they're not being rejected.
Vote, please. It's just really, really important in primaries all the time, and for your alderman or your council member here. I think we've all recognized that, when we don't pay attention to government, it kind of just goes on its own. And maybe not in directions that we love. So I think that's really important. We are doing we're going to be working here over the summer and into midterms to make sure that we can get as many new Americans, that is our lane, but we appreciate old Americans as well, or native born to come and vote. But we would really, please, this is really important, just being engaged with what is happening right now, understand how your government works, and door knock, phone bank. And I guess I would say lastly, and the young ladies, thank you for your question. I will echo that, I got a fancy master's degree in diplomacy, which told me eat with people. But I can prove it with science. And so I would say, find a place in yourself where you're practicing civil conversation, you're practicing opening yourself up. I tell our young immigrant youth, knowledge is power. The more that you know, the more you know about how the U.S. immigration system, how our government works, the more powerful that you are, because you know when it's a truth and when it's a lie, or when you're being vilified. And so I would say, empower yourself, eat more food with people, and vote. That's my power plan.
Great, I'm crossing off eating. But to eating, this church does hold welcome dinners for our clients, so you're already there. I'll just focus on two big things. I think that the gentleman who just spoke, the woman that spoke, jobs. We need to talk about economic investment for everybody. So one of the ways you can help newcomers is if you have job leads, please contact our agency. We don't want people to stay in entry-level jobs. We want to open those doors up for everybody and move people up, so we always need leads on jobs. That's a very specific one. The second one is the International Institute commercial. Please visit our website. If you want to donate goods, there's a list of what you can donate to help set up families. If you want to donate cash because you want to subsidize our English classes, we will certainly accept your gift. And then if you all know me, I love stories. We have a storytelling series called Suitcase Stories. That's a traveling performance series. The entire revenue underwrites our resettlement program. We raised $85,000 last year thanks to audience members like you. The next show is in Weston on April 12th, and it features U.S. and foreign-born residents telling compelling stories about immigration. And the cards are downstairs at the table.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight, and that's a start. For you to sit here until this time and to chat about this, that's a start, and that's a great start. So I want to thank Beth and Tom and everyone that organized this, and for us to be open with one another. I think it's really, it's very important. And even if you can't vote, for those that can't vote, as I mentioned earlier today, we had a rally, we had a DACA march at Middlesex Community College, and even though these students can't vote, they can still take a stand and let their voices be heard. And Congresswoman Tsongas showed up, and she listened. And I think it's very important. And even if you can't vote now, you can always influence your friends. You can always work to support those that care about what you care about. So that's what I would do.
And Amy?
We've talked about how limited the resources are that are available for immigrants, so I would encourage people to donate to reputable immigration organizations or organizations that support immigrants. Another thing you can do, we've talked about how expensive it is to even just, submit applications. So while there may be people who are undocumented, they have a path, but they just can't afford to pay the filing fee. So I would also encourage people to start raising funds to help immigrants with filing fees. Or for bond. We're having a lot of immigrants who are granted bond, which would allow them to get out of detention, but they just can't afford it. It's $4,000 to $20,000 to get out on bond. It's really expensive, and that helps people stay with their families and get back home. And then I would just voice what everyone has already voiced, which is, I think a lot of it is just exposure and sharing. I think for a lot of people, immigrants are sort of this other thing. They think brown people speaking Spanish, but it's so much more than that. My dad, I'm adopted from Korea. I came when I was 3 months old. People look at me and think immigrant. I'm a US citizen. My dad immigrated from England. No one looks at him and thinks that he's an immigrant. So I think also to be sort of conscious about our assumptions and sort of the attributes that we apply to people just because they look a certain way or, whatever. And just to, be more conscious in how we deal with others around us.
Thank you all. I've been reminded, when I was in high school, I had a teacher who in chapel would end her chapel with the following words, and it's just echoed back all evening, and she would say, and I once looked up the author, and I apologize, I cannot remember who wrote this. They drew a circle and shut me out, but love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and let them in. Thank you so much for coming.